and give it at the end of the event. Let us now watch a video about traceability, and then we will have the lecture of Ricardo Andrade with Institutional Relations of Cicb. He will present to us a panorama for the leather industry. Brazil is one of the largest exporters of agri-products throughout the world. Therefore, this faces major pressure related to environmental issues. In this sense, traceability is an important ally to prove that the production of grain and animal protein happens in official areas according to environmental standards. The challenges of big commodities like cotton, soy, and corn, among others, is to meet the requirements of the global markets. When it comes to livestock, there must be traceability of the entire production process. The slaughterhouses can get information from their suppliers, who they bought from. The challenge is to control the farms and the indirect farmers, the indirect suppliers. This is because the market wants to know if the territories where the animals went through from their birth until slaughter are free from environmental irregularities. An important challenge for Brazil, since in several cases of animals born in one farm and then sold to a second property where they join with other cows to then be sold to a third farm where the final production process happens, the fattening. So how do you prove to the market that during this entire trajectory the animals were produced in legal areas? Does Brazil have an answer for this challenge? That's what Ricardo wants to answer us now. Ricardo, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to receive you here this afternoon and to talk about this important topic, which is traceability. I prefer to use more general terms, talking about sustainability. Perhaps that's the word which fits best for us, because traceability is a tool within the quality system, within the sustainability system. This is a topic that we're treating today. I'm going to share some aspects of the sector, something that the tannery sector has regarding this demand, and take advantage of this moment to congratulate all the women on International Women's Day. When it comes to the leather industry, we're going to talk about three modules. One is livestock. What does livestock have to do with leather? It has everything to do. We are partners for several years. We work along with them to build a Brazil that's more inclusive, a Brazil that exports a lot, that is relevant in the exports, but it's also relevant in terms of leather. Socio-environmental control of suppliers is perhaps most significant. We're talking not just about the traceability. It's not just about understanding where a calf comes from or where a bull comes from, but if where it comes from is meeting the environmental regulations. So we're going to talk about traceability in the leather supply chain. First of all, I think it's important to highlight that these are the tanneries distributed throughout Brazil. We have 214 tanneries. So I want to highlight the northern region, where we have a large demand, especially in regards to deforestation. It's an area that's developed a lot, both in livestock and agriculture. And in the north, we have only 12 tanneries working in this region. It's an important cutout because a large part of leather production is still in the Midwest, Southeast, and especially in the South. This is an important point. Environmental certifications. This is also significant. We have 78% of the companies in Brazil with environmental certificates from tanneries. This is a significant number, especially when we see that there was a reduction in companies that don't have certification. This means that more and more there's a greater concern of industry so that we can fit into market requirements. Livestock in Brazil, I want to go over this quickly. But the challenges that we believe exist today are these. There's others as well, but for the sake of brevity, I chose these for us to better understand. First of all, Brazil is a Brazil of several Brazils. Sometimes people talk about Brazil has problems with traceability, that we don't know how to do it or that we don't do it. And I ask, what Brazil are you talking about? If you talk about the state of Santa Catarina, we have individual traceability for several years, vaccination control, effective control of the public policy regarding these controls. But then we also have Brazil in the north, in Pará, Mato Grosso, which is a region where we're still fully under development. But the agents that are present in these states are very aware and aligned with the need for us to seek solutions for traceability. First of all is the maintenance of our markets. I'd like to do a cutout here where we have a major demand from consumers regarding climate change. Increasingly, climate change has changed the situation throughout the world. Obviously, it's more present in Europe because of the challenges they are facing. But it is a global problem, and we all have our responsibility. If we look at the markets with consumer demand, we can see China where the demands are more related to food safety. Brazil has for several years worked with the system of sanitary control very efficiently. We export to over 100 countries for several years, countries that are very demanding like the United States, Europe, and others. And so we have done this for a long time, and now we're being questioned about what we've been doing for a long time. We also have European consumers who are very concerned about issues regarding climate change and deforestation, which is related to this topic. The issuing of gases, we're talking about deforestation, the change in soil usage. We're using the soil and we're deforesting. This is a concern of our sector. Traceability of the indirect supplier. And what I mean is, when we talk about traceability, the challenge today is the traceability of indirect suppliers. Environmental regulation is another important topic, so that we can make the controls and use the tools available. It's important that regulations all be promoted by the appropriate agencies, especially public agents, which are responsible for this work. And of course, animal welfare, a very important topic. when we talk about animal welfare, you go to a tannery today, it might have 5 markings. I think we need to think about this. I think it's an important topic when we're talking about animal welfare. It doesn't seem appropriate for a animal with 5 markings on its body to be according to some criteria for animal welfare. I'd also like to highlight land usage. Here we made a brief comparison as to how we could save land with our production. Brazil stood out both in soy and commodities and beef. And we're also linked to deforestation as if we needed more production area, and that's not true. If we look at soy, between 2000 and 2020, we have a 30% productivity increase. And we've made available 15.2 million hectares. Corn is the same. We have 2 harvests. The second harvest, we had an increase of the area that was quite significant, and this increase allowed us to have a reduction or availability of more than 10.8 million hectares. And in livestock as well, to share some figures of reduction in pasture, an increase in the herd, and an increase in productivity. We're talking about an economy of 32.4 million hectares. We're talking about half the agriculture of France, 3 times Portugal, twice Germany. This would be a total savings of almost 84 million hectares. So we're talking about 1/3 of production area set free. If we look at productivity today, it's being worked on in Brazil. Productivity around 1.5 or 2, more advanced systems up to 3 units of animal per hectare. We'd only need to have 65 million in pasture area to produce what we produce today. We don't need to deforest anymore. Brazil has done this work for several years, and so we're observing the possibility of always working with this vision where we can produce more in less area sustainably. This graph here is also very important. We're looking at productivity and pasture area. If we look at the last several years, in the last 30 years, we've had a significant reduction of the pasture area, and at the same time, we had 3 times production growth. So every day, Brazil needs less land to produce more beef. I think this is an interesting factor. How is this done? There are several practices which are available today to farmers. We're talking about pasture recovery. We're talking about culture rotation. We're talking about integration between plantation and livestock. So if we're working with forest, for example, we're looking at 1 carbon emission for 9 sequestered. So not only do we produce with quality, but we produce with low carbon or with carbon sequestration. The reduce of the slaughter, the emissions are more related to the production of methane. But basically, the greater part of our emissions are related to methane. In Brazil, it represents only 6% of global emissions for carbon dioxide. Sometimes we're made out to be a major villain when it comes to emissions. But if we look at just the livestock, we're 2% of global emissions, where China is 27%, Europe is 17%, the United States is 23%. The three blocks of countries together have more than 60% of the emissions. It's certainly not our 5% that's causing the big problem. Social environmental control, some of the main certifications. What I need to bring to you with all my industrial experience in the leather industry, the tracing system for beef and leather has been done for several years. When I started my education, one of the first studies I did was traceability, and that was 30 years ago. We've done this for several years. The tannery has a long history of doing this. This entire process is audited by huge companies, international companies. So it's important for us to understand that we do great work within the industry, within the slaughterhouse, within the tannery. There's strict control, and there are control points that are very important, which are audited, and Brazilian companies, Brazilian tanneries lead the certifications of a company. Proportionally speaking, the quantity of gold certifications, the most important certification, we're leaders in the certification, which means that we're able to meet the criteria established by the markets. We have, starting with animal certification, leather certification, LWG, Cicb, from the public ministry in the north regarding socio-environmental, and all the ISSO certifications regarding the environment. Everything is provoking the changes. So we're talking today about deforestation, but this concern was already seen in the Forest Code. This concern already existed, and based off of that, several tools were created for us to be able to work. The cattle purchase criteria. This is some of the data of what we need to be able to buy cattle. If we're talking about the slaughterhouse, we need IBAMA, SIMA, CAR, all these agencies, PRODIS, which will read the deforestation, and GTA, which is the transit guide, which brings the sanitary history of the animal. So through these agencies and geospatial data, we can monitor the chain. Today, it's very much concentrated in the direct suppliers, but we have several companies that are working more intensely with the indirect. Agreements for monitoring, biome and tropical forest, minimum criteria for cattle at an industrial scale, Resolution 1854 of the National Development Bank, medium and large size slaughterhouses adjust their conduct in agreements. The major slaughterhouses have a commitment for 100% of the direct suppliers to be checked, and in the Cerrado biome, the slaughterhouses extend the same controls in the region. And so companies are working to develop efforts with several other companies. Here is a supplier farm level 1 or 2. Level 2 and level 3 are farms that supply level 1 indirect suppliers. There are goals to control this. JBS 2025, Marfrig, and Minerva for the entire country. Tools, traceability by lot, uses the Animal Transit Guide, which is a document for sanitary purposes. We have transparent and other tools available, each one with their own role. These are all tools which I can say are able to bring the answers that we need, but we must expand the capillarity of these actions so that they can be inclusive and not only for the large slaughterhouses or large tanneries. International legislation. It's very important to see that the due diligence legislation of Europe brings regulations that includes legal and illegal deforestation. Starting in January 2025, we'll have to prove that we don't buy animals or use leather from areas that were deforested either legally or illegally. This is not just Europe, but the United States has a demand that's in transit, and the UK also has similar requirements. Two types of traceability which exist today. There's individual. Today we are directing this stability to the European Union. We have the transit guide and these systems. These systems don't include the socio-environmental topic. They can trace, but we can't do league with the socio-environmental traceability. Just so we can understand a bit, I know all this is a bit complex, but here we have level 3 farms which deliver cattle directly to the slaughterhouse. These farms have the direct supplier, which have low risk and high socio-environmental evidence. We're talking about direct suppliers, we're talking about suppliers that we can prove their social environmental personhood. We go all the way to the farm at level 1, where we have little social evidence. These are monitoring points. Here you can have spatial monitoring as well as the full monitoring. All these in green have low risk. In the blue ones we have medium evidence, and specialized farms for fattening we have minimal evidence. Pará is one of the major producing states, and most of the problem with deforestation is related to direct farming, and another 39% in regards to indirect farms at the first level. We need to work with the indirect supplier, but we have a lot of homework to do still. Indirect suppliers of the third level represent only 8% of the socio-environmental problems of deforestation. Traceability until the tannery. Here we have the criteria necessary. The first necessary criteria is the criteria for purchasing. We require the documents that were already shown so that we can use these documents to monitor if necessary. This document will go to the slaughterhouse. They have several documents. Recently we did a document with the IBECI, and this document will be presented to everyone, which is to normalize the documents necessary for us to be able to work in this way. Once we have these documents, the leather goes to the tannery, and we'll start marking the hide. What's the importance of traceability within the Cortumi, within the tannery? Once the leather is in the tannery, most of the tanneries, as I already mentioned, have a traceability system for production that are quite efficient. They are audited by large companies, so when they come into the tannery until they go out to the client, we can ensure that these products are traced. What we need to do now, along with our partners, is to also ensure the origin. When it comes to marking, we have several types of marking, with hammers, pneumatic, laser. This will include the slaughterhouse, the production day, and perhaps the batch. All these markings are efficient. All of them work quite well. All of them meet the criteria of traceability. The difference being the level of technology that is being used and how are the slaughterhouses using this. These are international certifications: ISO 9000, Blue Angel, CSB, all things related to the automobile industry. These requirements exist, and so the level for control and traceability is very high. That's what I wanted to thank everyone for. Thank you all.